At Legendary Tactics, we love getting deep into strategy. Today's video comes to us from Denmark. Our friend Boneless Dota has been creating a wealth of resources. I'll link to his channel below. This video focuses on tile placement strategy in Terraforming Mars, and also on how to get Ocean Adjacency bonuses. If you're looking for a super nerdy and insightful look at Terraforming Mars, you've come to the right place.
Welcome back to my Terraforming Mars strategy guide. Today's episode is tiles and ocean rebates. So today we're going to talk about optimal tile placements, and also we're going to talk about how to get the maximum efficiency out of your ocean rebates or ocean adjacency bonus, if you will. So we're going to talk about all three different maps today. We're going to start with Elysium, then we're going to move on to Tharsis, which is the base map, and then Hellas, and then I have a few other topics I would like to discuss, like how to deny enemy rebates and the ocean standard project. There are chapters in the description, so for example, if you only care about the base map, which is Tharsis, then you can just go and find that chapter. But let's start off nice and basic. There are two types of people in this world. There are people who love plants, and then there's also people like Saruman from Lord of the Rings. And I thought I like plants and plant production. I think it's really good, but recently I've been spending some time with the top elo players on Steam, and these guys, they really love plants. So the tempo players who seek to end the game in as few generations as possible, these guys will just take the 3 plants and make a bunch of greeneries next to ocean. And it's even better if you can place down the ocean next to the 3 plants as your first action and then claim this tile as your second action, because this will give you +2 mega credits. It could also be the tile right to the left of this one. Let's say both of the oceans in the middle have been made. In that case, it makes a lot of sense to just place it right there instead. On the other hand, the greedy players will be really tempted about grabbing these 3 tasty cards up here. And I know I like to divide it into the greedy playstyle and the tempo playstyle because it just makes a lot of sense for me, but of course you can mix and match this however you want. Like naturally in some cases the tempo player will also tend to take the 3 cards, maybe they just have bad cards at the beginning of the game, and at the same time the greedy players might also build in the middle of the map with all the plants here, because it's just a really good place to be no matter what style you're playing. And then you might be thinking, what about this tile up here? Isn't this tile also really good? I actually had a huge discussion with the tempo nerds not too long ago about this. So Inquisitor mentioned this tile in particular and said, isn't this really good because it's adjacent to tiles that can give you 4, 4, 6, 6 back in ocean rebates later in the game once the oceans have been placed. So he's talking about these 4 spots here. But then Anthracite, who's like one of the absolute goats of this game, he said, well, you should not calculate the rebates adjacent to the ocean and not add the value for plants collected. This area of Elysium isn't even the best area in Elysium, as the 2 to 3 plant spots in the middle are worth 4 to 6 mega credits by themselves. And of course, this is the way to think about it. Like, plants are actually really valuable. One plant is worth around 2 mega credits. Some of the tempo nerds will even argue it's even more than 2 mega credits, but just for the sake of argument, let's say a plant is worth 2 mega credits. Having this in mind, we should upgrade this tile here so 6 mega credits rather than 4 mega credits. So if we apply this logic to the middle of the map, you can see here that there's actually a lot of value to be collected here. It's definitely the best place to be if you are valuing plants and if you can get the oceans down around it, because these numbers here, they are of course if you get maximum ocean rebates. So what about this tile here with the 3 cards? What is this tile with? So previously I've been saying that a random card is worth 3 mega credits, and in the 2-player games where you play really greedy is worth around 4 mega credits. But there's also this argument to be made that if you're going all in on terraforming, if you just want to close the game really quickly, you're playing a tempo game and the cards in your hand are already fine, they're already supporting the strategy, then a random card is not worth that much to you. So in that case it could be argued that the random card is only worth 2 mega credits. And that also ties into the storyline I'm trying to push here, that generally speaking the cards are just better for greedy players. The thing is, if you're playing this game where you just want to end the game as soon as possible, then it is a little bit dangerous to just pick up too many cards, because it kind of ruins your tempo. So if you go back to the map and if you're really pessimistic on card draw in general and say a random card is only worth 2 mega credits, well then this tile is kind of like worth 6 mega credits before we calculate in the rebates. I think a more average view on how much a random card is worth is more like 3 mega credits, in that case it's 9. And if you are a completely greedy player and you're playing the ultra greedy uber card strategy, then in that case I would still argue that a card is worth 4 mega credits, but only in that case. But let's stick with 3 mega credits for a random card. I think most people will agree on this. But if we apply the logic from before, that we're just calculating in the dream scenario the max ocean rebates, well in that case, if we place this tile next to the 2 oceans that's already been placed, then this should be 13, right? I don't think this tile is 13. I think it's still a bit too high, and there's a few different reasons for this. First of all, these 2 oceans we just mentioned here, these are generally not the first oceans to be placed. The only way these 2 tiles will actually be placed as the first oceans is because you yourself are placing them, because you are intending to grab the 3 cards with maximum rebates afterwards. And while we added, this tile up here also almost never gets placed, like in general, so I feel like we have to do a little bit of adjustments here. So with maximum rebates, this tile up here is worth worth 4, but it's not that often that this ocean gets placed, so I think I would say it's more like 2, to be honest. And I think a fair value of what this tile with the 3 cards are worth is around 9, because like I said, it's not often that these 2 oceans gets placed before somebody grabs these 3 cards here. And also you're kind of restricting yourself by placing a tile over here, or like the tempo nerds would say, this tile has a bad portal. And don't you worry, we're gonna talk plenty about portals in a minute, but before we do that, let's actually discuss the best oceans on this map. So as always, it depends on the game, but usually these 2 oceans are the first to be made. The oceans themselves comes with 2 plants on them, so that alone is good. And also it just enables all of these tasty rebate spots around the little lake here. And technically the 6 and 8 to the northeast, these are not worth this yet until you place more oceans. But this is also why that the next oceans that will usually get placed are these 2. So you can see the theme here. These 2 oceans also come with 1 plant each, and also you just enable yourself to get this golden little landscape here with 3 8s. Well, based on this system, this tile should be worth 5, but it could be argued that it's worth a lot more because, like Inquisitor was talking about, it does have some juicy neighbors. But the thing is, if I start rewarding some tiles for having good neighbors, then this is just a rabbit hole from which I have no idea how to navigate. So let's just say that this tile is worth 5, as long as you know that there's a lot more things to consider. You also have to consider the good neighboring tiles, you have to consider teleports, you have to consider which oceans are usually played first, and you also have to consider what are my opponents doing this game. So is the tile with the 3 cards any good? I think generally yes. Like as a greedy player myself, I'm very tempted to actually grab these 3 cards in most games. But preferably you really want to grab this with a special tile. It could be natural preserve, restricted area, nuclear zone, something like this. Could also be the experimental forest prelude. Another goat called Parker, his superhero name is actually Gods, while his secret identity name is Parker. He said that while there's always exceptions, I think the general too long didn't read of Elysium is don't put cities on the 3 cards. It's not worth the investment generally, and any tempo rush strat should prioritize plants rebates in the middle or the left of the board over the 3 cards. Those 3 cards can get heavily overvalued early on with people over investing to get them. So the point is, if possible, you really want to claim the 3 cards with a special tile. But let's get back to portals. As you may have guessed, the point is that it's really hard to scratch your own back if you don't have a portal. Actually, it's kind of weird the way I'm phrasing it, so that, yeah, probably no way you guessed that. Actually, the real point here is that the rules say that you must place greenery next to a tile that you own, if possible. So did I just make this comparison just so I had an excuse to show you this portal meme that I like about a woman scratching her own back? Maybe. The point is, it's kinda hard to get back to the middle of the map once you've committed and placed a tile on the edge of the map. And you might be thinking, well, what's the big deal? I can just buy a city for 25 as a standard project to get back into the middle of the map. And no, you really don't want to do that. It's very expensive. It's not worth it, especially not in the early game. So if you're thinking, alright, you're spending way too much time on this portal stuff, it's really not that big of a deal. But I'm telling you, I've spent some time with these tempo nerds, and the top 3 words that they like to say when I talk to them. Number 3 is portal, number 2 is ocean, and number 1 is rebate. I'm not kidding. And also heat production. They also love heat production. So actually scratch that new list. Top 4 words amongst the top ranked players on Steam. Number 4, heat production. Number 3, portal. Number 2, ocean. Number 1, rebate. I'm serious. It's like catnip to these people. They just love to say these 4 words. So having all of this in mind, I think these numbers here are fair, as long as you keep in mind that there's no portal on the 3 cards. Or, well, I'm saying no portal, but it's more like it's kind of a bad portal, if that makes sense. It takes a while to get to the middle. So when all said and done, the middle part of the map is the best place to be. You can also go for the cards if you feel greedy, but to be honest, like I mentioned, it can also just be the tempo guy who just needs the card, you know? Anthracite made a good point here as well. He said that it's important to understand that these rebates are worth 2 times the face values in 2-player games, as if you don't capture them yourself, your opponent will. This makes them deceptively powerful swings. If you develop 2 cash prod, that doesn't cost your opponent anything, but if you take the 3 plant spot, not only do you gain 3 plants, your opponent loses them. So I mean, if you want to take what it says literally, then you could actually double all the values on these in 2-player games. I don't know, it gets a little bit out of control, you know what I mean? It's not quite like this. So the overall values are like this, but like I said, I kind of feel like the right side is a little bit too strong in this case, which is why I would like adjust it a little bit so it looks more like this. And speaking of Anthracite, I showed some of my slides to the guys in the Discord group, and Anthracite was like, oh, okay, that's cool. I actually had a conversation once upon a time with this guy Stefan F, and we like came up with this map here. here. So as you can see, it's pretty similar, which makes sense when you think about it, because Anthracite also puts plants to be worth 2. The only difference really is that on Anthracite's and Stefan F's map, it's like cards are worth 4, whereas I put cards to be 3. And then the map they've made is like the perfect scenarios for all of the tiles, so it's of course what they were going for, so I'm not blaming them, but at the same time it doesn't really reflect how the tiles should look like, I think. The best example I can give on this map is that they put the tile with the 3 cards to be worth 16, which is of course way too high. And the reason they put this tile to be 16 is of course they just calculated with maximum rebates, which is a little bit unrealistic, and also they put a random card to be worth 4, and also they didn't take into account that this tile has a bad portal. The Meister said, I think the evaluation of the 3 card spot as very high compared to the other spots is right. The main issue, as you already wrote, is that the bad position that you usually lock yourself into if you go there. Also the eastern spots needs a lot of oceans to yield the rebates, while the center only needs 2 central oceans to unlock a ton of cash. If you take 3 cards, you usually miss those, and thus they're only worth it if you're really desperate or you have another teleport. Parker also agreed with this. He said, yeah, if you have an awful hand and you need cards to build you up of a crappy start, maybe cards is okay. If you have a city prelude plus Tharsis city, then maybe cards is okay, 3 plants with the other. Although even here, a city and 3 plants and 1 left to the ocean seems likely better. Getting the 3 cards is like some Biolab 3 card draw, where you can just cripple your start and board control if those 3 cards flop. So it is generally agreed upon that the right side of the map with the 3 cards over here, those tiles should be nerfed a little bit, because these tiles do come with a lot of drawback. I think Anthracite himself would also agree with this. The thing is, he didn't make this map for educational purposes. It's literally just a conversation he had a long time ago with this guy Stefan F. So imagine making a map like this just because you're just having a casual conversation. I'm telling you guys, these guys are absolute nerds. It's fucking amazing. And then they also made this map here, which in Anthracite's own words is a way to think about city placement potential, stating the rebate value of placing a city there and surrounding it with greeneries. So it's really cool that they also mathed out the best places to be if you're building a city. And it's really no surprise that the best place to build a city is in the middle of the map. So this tile here is the highest with a value of 36, which is no surprise because this is generally agreed upon that this is the best place to place a city. Then also the tiles right next to it are good. We got 30 on this tile and 30 on this tile. Then the tile Inquisitor was talking about has a value of 28, and apparently the one right next to it is 29, but I think that's a little bit misleading because the top left ocean almost never gets played. And once again, these values to the right side of the map are a little bit too high like we talked about. Generally, it's not the best place to build a city over here. So with all of this in mind, let's look at how especially tempo players likes to build on this map. And you get the idea by now. They just want to make a bunch of oceans, put a bunch of greeneries next to the oceans, just end the game as soon as possible. Incredibly boring. And then once they've done something like this, then they might put 2 oceans over here to the right, and then they might claim the 3 cards with a nuclear zone or something. But you know, I'm oversimplifying a little bit. I think if they have a special tile like nuclear zone, they will probably take the 3 cards a little bit sooner. So a typical tempo game on the highest level on the Mars app, for example, it could really look something like this. It's a little bit oversimplified. I think they would put in some special tiles to actually block each other off from rebates and stuff like this. But aside from that, this is pretty much how they would like to play. I even showed this picture to some of the guys on the Discord, and they're like, yeah, it looks pretty good. To me, however, this just looks like a bland salad, to be honest. Like, no cheese, no dressing, just a bland salad with no joy, no enjoyment whatsoever. And you might be thinking, there's not even one city here, there's even a spot here where you could get 3 points for city. But in these super fast tempo games, cities are just not that important. I had a YouTube comment on one of my videos by Mac Bescheiden who said, I don't agree with the argument that you have to build a city in a game. Why? I've had games where I did nothing on Mars and won by miles. And initially I just said to him, well, for no other reason that plant production is really strong in this game, so having just one city is often pretty nice, so you have a reliable way of scoring points with your own greeneries next to your cities. But I agree with you that sometimes it's not even necessary to have one city, but in my experience in most games having at least one city feels correct. So I thought about it some more, and really to be precise, in greedy games you should always have at least one city. In tempo games, however, you might only have one city or maybe no cities at all. So that's pretty much what I replied to this guy recently. I also said to him, having games where you have nothing on Mars at all is not recommended, as plant production is just way too good in this game. And I want to make this clear, plant production is great in literally every strategy, which means that you should have at least a few greeneries on the map in literally every single game. We can actually go through the strategy real quick to show you what I mean. So in the first strategy, refuse to terraform, yes, you're gonna have plant production. In the second strategy, where you're the filthy dirty terraformer, obviously you're gonna have plant production. In the third strategy, where you go for the card strategy, where you just want to go for a long game and make a ton of points, yes, yes, you're also gonna have plant production in this case, because the thing is you're gonna have discount on cards, you're gonna have a ton of green tech synergy, and also it's just a very nice way to score points having a bunch of plant production. So plant production is always good. And then strategy 5 and 6 are pretty much extensions of the card strategy. So strategy number 5, Jovian tags, sure, let's go plant production. Strategy number 6, green tags, of course, like I mentioned, then you're also gonna have plant production. And finally the mid-game strategy where you don't know yet if you want to go for the long game or just terraform like crazy. Like no matter what, you want plant production. Plant production is always good, which means you should always have some greeneries on the map. So like I mentioned, in tempo games you may only have one city. It could be like here, which is the best city spot. It could also be here or here or here. But you know, it really depends on the game. It could also be the case that you want to build a city here because then you can access all of the plants on this side of the map, so building greenery like this. In greedy games where you really maximize to get a lot of VP and go for the long game, I think the map should look a little bit different. So me being a greedy player, I would tend to favor the cards in a lot of cases. So like we talked about, you should really try to have a special tile on the 3 cards. Then for even more greed, you could put mining area on top of the 2 steel here, or you can put an ocean to get this card over here. Alternatively, if the 3 cards have already been taken, you can put restricted area over here on the 2 titanium, because that will allow you to put mining area up here on the titanium. But these are just examples. It could also be that even though you're playing the greedy game, you still want to just like put a tile in the middle of the map here, because then you're kind of blocking the tempo players. They cannot get what they want in the middle of the map. Then it could look something like this. If you're lucky, you can get capital in the middle of the map here, but usually once there are 4 oceans placed, I mean, this tile is usually taken before you get to play capital, but just a thought. Then if we continue with this, let's be honest, this dream, then we can also build over here, or we can build over to the right. If you have a mangrove or something, you can also go south, usually because there's some desert settler you want to win. So like I said, this is probably a dream. This is not happening, to be honest, but I just wanted to show you how I would build a map if I just really maximize to get the most points as possible. So since we'd be greedy here, I would tend to favor the card, and look at this color palette, man, it's beautiful. We got cheese, we got dressing, we got croutons. It's like this salad looks very tasty to me. So basically what I'm saying is, in super greedy games, you place your cities in a way so they can score the most VP as possible. And just for a second, compare this beautiful map to this super boring tempo player map. Oh my god. Ay ay ay. Now let's look at the Tharsis map, which is actually the map from the base game. It's just called Tharsis, like the corporation, just to confuse you. So first of all, let's look at the best oceans to place on this map. So usually amongst the top players, these are the first 3 oceans to be played. On this map, the best place to be is in the middle of the map near the river. If you can get away with it, it's also pretty tasty to just place an ocean here and then place something next to it, like a special tile or something. It could also be a city, but like we talked about, in tempo games especially, you don't really play that many cities. The point is that this tile in particular is really important to control, and the reason is that later on, once the oceans gets placed, there are some really tasty spots for ocean rebates right next to this tile. And you might be thinking, hey, what about the 2 cards? And yes, you are correct. If you are a greedy player like me, you will grab the 2 cards as soon as possible. But even if you are the greedy player, there's no denying that these oceans here are usually the best. Just keep in mind that you kind of want to have something on the map if you place these oceans, because otherwise you're just setting up your tempo opponent to take the really good water rebates. And of course, if you are the greedy player, the 2 titanium can also be nice, and we could go on. So here are the most important spots for ocean rebates with this very simple calculation. A card is worth 3, steel's worth 2, titanium is worth 3, plants are worth 2. And you might be thinking the tile I just mentioned, the tile up here, is only worth 4, but it can really be argued that this tile is worth a lot more as it got some really juicy neighbors. This is the best starting tile. You could even make the argument that this tile is worth 8 or something. We could also go a step further and include these tiles here, especially in the north. There are some high numbers as well. But once again, if you take these water rebates, you just have to keep in mind that these rebates have very bad portals, because like I said, the best place to be in this map is in the middle of the map. And to illustrate this point about the portals, I actually have a game on my channel where I got in a little bit of trouble because I put the mohole area up here on the 2 cards. I don't think it's bad to go for the cards, but considering this was a 4-player game and considering that my strategy was to close the game as soon as possible, this was definitely the wrong location. So just to give you some perspective from one of these top tempo players, Jeffrey Colbert mentioned that this is definitely the wrong location for mohole area. He also said that business contacts where I just draw some cards, even this might slow you down because tempo is so important in these tempo games, and he said, well, it might actually be okay just because now you need to find a new teleport to go to the river. I'm not going to read all of this, you can pause the video if you want, but basically I said to him, is it really that bad to take the cards? In this case, I even got insulation, which was a huge pickup. And then I asked him, if you were playing, where would you have put the mohole area? And he said on the 1 plant elbow bent ocean. So I think he was talking about this spot here. He didn't did say one plant, so that would technically be the tile right underneath this one, but I'm guessing this tile here is better. Maybe this is what he meant. Just because this tile has 2 plants instead of 1 plant, this would probably be better, but the point is more like, now I have a portal to get to the middle of the map. So later on when I play some oceans, I have some nice water rebates. So I'm gonna show you how this game shaped out. I had a ton of heat production, but I didn't have very much plant production, at least not in the first half of the game. And by the way, this game had 2 green players. Don't ask me how that happened, but all the tile that I'm controlling is the tile with the head of Jakob Fuxelius. But as you can see, I got in a little bit of trouble here because of these cities that my opponents played. So my first greenery conversion is actually really ugly. I just get 1 steal and then I give an opponent 1 victory point. Luckily my economy was really strong in this game because of all of the terraforming I've been doing, so I just ended up building a city standard project for 25. Generally you kinda don't want to do this because the standard project is kinda bad, especially if you're going for the tempo strat. But in this game I felt I could get away with it because of my strong economy, and I really desperately needed a portal to get to the mid-river. I actually placed my city up here, which is a little bit questionable, not gonna lie. The thing is, I just had so much plant production, I just wanted to maximize how many points I could get out of my greeneries, but it is questionable. I think a better place for this city could have been here, right by the river, and then I could convert immediately right next to it to deny this tasty spot from my opponent. And then if I wanted to, I could have even converted 1 more greenery in this generation thanks to the plants I'm getting from the good rebate spots. And in this case it didn't really matter that much because soon after I also claimed the city to the south near the river, and then I also had Noctis City in my hands, so there's a nice little empire I'm getting here. It's fine. So I think these values here are pretty fair. I don't think there's anything I would adjust on this map. So once again, if we just compare this to the map Anthracite and Stefan F made a while ago, you can see we're pretty much in agreement. The only difference is that they put a random card to be 4 and I put a random card to be 3. And when it comes to the best city placements on this map, I would say that this city spot here is the best one. I know I only put this tile to be 4, but like I said, it could easily be more because look at all of these neighbors here. It's really good. But if this spot has already been taken, which is very likely, then I think I would be tempted to take the city over here, especially if we are in the first generation. If no oceans has been placed yet, then I think this spot for a city is pretty good because there's so many plants over here. And if these 2 city spots has been taken, I think these 2 are also good plan B. They don't actually come with any placement bonus themselves, but they have very good neighbors, as you can see here. And then Noctis City of course also makes a lot of sense, but the thing about this city is you don't want to play it too early. I was playing a game where Anthracite was coaching me and we were doing like a tempo strat, like closing the game as soon as possible, and he actually said that I should keep Noctis City in my starting hand even, and I was like, well, isn't it bad because isn't tempo really important? But he said, no, we're just gonna keep it for the entire game and then we're gonna play it in the last generation, because the thing is, the power of this card is not actually the mega credit production. It's very expensive to just get 3 mega credit production for 18 plus the card plus an energy production. So that surprised me a little bit in a tempo game where we just wanted to close the game as soon as possible. Anthracite told me to keep Noctis City in my opening hand just so I could play it in the last generation. So a map that looks something like this could make a lot of sense. This is both for tempo games and for greedy games, but once again, if you are playing a super fast tempo game, likely you're not gonna have this many cities. So if we compare this to the map that Anthracite and Stefan F made for the best city placement spots, then we can see that the best city by far is this one for 36, and it makes a lot of sense. And then if you cannot get this spot here, then the spots next to it also makes a lot of sense. So we got 32 for this spot here, we got 28 for this spot here, but really you kind of want this spot here for 36. That's definitely the best spot. And then we got this city spot over here for 23. It's not actually as high as this one. This one is 24, but that's of course provided that you'll get maximum ocean rebates for all of it. So I'd still say that this city spot is marginally better in the early game because in the early game there are not so many oceans being placed yet. So if I'm going for an Omega greedy game, I might even do something like this where I'm going for the cards, but even then I still want this really good city spot near the river. And once again, it doesn't have to be a city, it can also be experimental for us or some of these special tiles. And speaking of the special tiles, the 2 special tiles I put over here to the left of the map, they are a little bit questionable. Like if you look at the value, it's only a value of 3 by placing here, but as I am a little bit biased towards getting cards, I might even do this. And it also has a little bit of side bonus because then you can also place mining area next to these tiles. But these are just examples. I mean, in this case, if you really did get mining area, you would of course put it up here next to the 2 ocean. And then the tempo nerds would probably tell you that getting cards is kind of bad, but if you are getting the card to the south, you should probably take the card next to it because this has a better portal to the ocean rebate, you know. But if I am being greedy, I would probably build something like this, and then at the end of the game it could look something like this. And then of course we should throw an ecological zone somewhere because this card is also really good. So let's compare this greedy map to how the tempo players would like to build, and it looks something like this. So it's all about getting the +2 mega credits for being next to ocean, it's all about getting all of the plants, it's all about ending the game as soon as possible. And it's so ugly, man. It looks like a bland salad. We got no tomatoes, no croutons, nothing. But even though it's incredibly ugly, there's no denying it is a valid play of how you can play the game. So in this game, for example, I went for a tempo game, I entered Generation 9, and the map looks like this. And here is a screenshot from a game between Random Ronnie and Dameister, who are both 2K players, and as you can see, the map looks like this. So this is definitely a way you can play the game. It does make a lot of sense in these tempo games, because then you're just valuing all the rebates over the points you're getting from cities and stuff. So it is something you can do, but if you really want to build like this, you should be ashamed of yourself. Now let's look at the Hellas map, and just to give you a little bit of insight, we were talking about these maps, and Inquisitor said that Hellas is actually the map everyone loves to hate because it's an engine builder's dream. So this is a nice place to start. Is this map actually better for engine builders and for the greedy strategy? And yes, I do kind of agree with Inquisitor. It makes a lot of sense, because on this map it's very hard to ocean walk with greeneries, and also the thing is there are two different bodies of oceans on this map, so if you are ocean walking next to one of the bodies of oceans, then you kind of need to teleport to get to the other one. It can be a little bit annoying for the tempo players. And also I think milestones and awards slightly favor engine builders on this map, and what I mean is like it's only Polar Explorer and Cultivator that really caters to the tempo engine. The rest of it really benefits you to have a lot of cards, and like I mentioned, Plan Production is also really good for the greedy players, so even the Cultivator, it might not be the tempo player who has the highest chance of getting this award. So when Inquisitor is saying that Hellas is the engine builder's dream, I think this makes a lot of sense. In most of the games in the early game, there are only two preferred areas on this map. Either you can go to the north where all the plants are, or you could go to the south to go for the Polar Explorer, or maybe you just want the really cheap ocean. So once again, if you put in all the values with max Ocean Adjacency bonus, then it looks something like this, and it's a little bit all over the place on this map. And once again, we got a very underappreciated tile with some very juicy neighbors, especially in the early game. I think this tile here is one of the ones you want to go for. Let's compare this to the map that Anthracite and Stefan F made, and the first thing that I'm wondering is why is this tile worth 4? Because it doesn't really fit with their pattern. Their pattern is just strictly math. They're not taking into account anything except for math. But generally speaking, we're pretty much in agreement. This tile should definitely have more values than just the 2, because they have some really good neighbors. And they're putting a random card to be worth 4, while I would put a random card to be worth 3. But once again, I don't think they made this for educational purposes. They literally just had a conversation, so I'm not gonna give them a hard time. However, it's kind of interesting that all of us landed on 8 when we were evaluating how much this tile should be worth, where you can get 1 extra ocean for 6 mega credits. I don't know how they thought about it, but my thinking is that if a terraform rating is worth 8 in the early game, then a placement bonus on top of water is worth around 6, so I think this makes a lot of sense. And I just gotta say that I know that these guys were just taking the perfect scenarios for all of the tiles, but this tile in particular, in the middle of the ocean where you get 3 heats, there's no way this is worth 15, man. If you think about it, if you set a heat to be worth 1 mega credit, which is what it looks like they did in the other parts of the map, then you will have to get literally perfect rebates for this tile to be worth 15, and that's just not happening. Alright, so like I mentioned, you can build in the south because you're going for the Polar Explorer milestone, or you just want the cheap ocean. And you might be thinking, where should this ocean go? And if you are the greedy player, I think it makes a lot of sense to just take the 2 titanium. You can even take the card if you're desperate, but it's not as good. But here's the thing, if you're building in the south, it can be a little bit awkward because you might lack a teleport to go to the north to get the plants. So for example, in the first generation, if you put a tile on top of the free ocean, and then that free ocean you place to the north to get some of the plants up there, well, now you don't have a portal to get up there, because if you're converting into greeneries, you have to place them next to a tile that you own. But maybe you have another portal in hand, maybe you have research outpost or something to get up north to get close to all of these plants. In that case, it's of course fine, because on this map it generally looks like this, where you start the game by playing these 2 oceans on the top left, and then afterwards you put greeneries next to these oceans like this. So in most games, players are doing it like this, even if you don't have a city. And the thing is, there's so many plants up here, so it just makes a lot of sense to build these 2 oceans and just convert next to the oceans to get the rebates. And then if you have a cheap city, it makes a lot of sense to put it here, or you can just continue to ocean walk if you're going for a tempo game. You can also put a city over here, it makes a lot of sense. You got a lot of plants, you got a few ocean rebates, and also there's a card close by. So it doesn't have to be here exactly, but generally speaking, I think these are the 2 best city spots. It could also be the city here that I personally am fond of, just because it's next to 2 cards and the cheap ocean. Once again, let's look at the map where Anthracite and Stefan F calculated the best city spots. So it's no surprise that this tile up here is generally the best place you can place a city. Apparently the one underneath it to the left is also worth 28, but I think this one is a little bit worse because it's generally agreed upon that 1 steel is worth a little less than 1 plant, which means that a city up here is slightly better. And then they put in this spot as one of the best spots for a city, and I think this is a little bit questionable. This is like assuming that you'll get perfect rebates for the ocean, and also they put the cards to be worth 4, so I think this is a a little wrong. I would much rather have a city up here for 22. That makes more sense to me. And then this spot down here where I talked about this questionable city, this is worth 22, so it's not bad, but they feel this placement is a little bit better because it's next to one titanium and next to one of the ocean rebates worth 2 mega credits, but me personally, I would still take the one to the left, closer to the cards. So if you're ocean walking, placing a lot of greeneries next to ocean, then you kinda need a teleport to get to the other body of oceans, and that can be a little bit awkward. So the oceans and the rebates to the left are a little bit better to begin with because they come with more plants. Like if you think about it, the first ocean you can place over here to the right will only yield you like one card or one plant or something. And even after you place the first ocean, the second ocean is also gonna be kinda weak, but then it picks up the pace a little bit because the third ocean you're gonna place is gonna be worth 4 or 6 or something like this, and then the last ocean you place on this island is gonna be worth 6 at least. So if you have a strategy where you just plan on placing a bunch of oceans, then it could make sense to build on the body of oceans to the right, because these ocean rebates get gradually better and better the more oceans you're placing. But that being said, I think it's still slightly better to play around the body of oceans to the left because this area just has more plants. So a typical game for tempo players could look something like this, where you have one city here to like connect it all, or you would have to get like a second portal to actually get to the other body of oceans. So it could look something like this, and I know what you're thinking. You're thinking I'm about to say that this looks like a bland salad with no tomatoes, no croutons, no cheese, no dressing, but I'm actually not gonna do that. Because even a greedy player like me, I can appreciate when I see something beautiful, and this kinda looks cool. It looks like an omega flower or something like that. So I even showed this picture to some of the guys, and I even asked them, anyone ever managed to build greeneries all the way around these 7 ocean tiles like this? And Molaram, he answered no, but it's beautiful. Even more so if you put a mangrove in the middle, and that just blew my mind. It's never happening obviously, but it's so pretty to think about. So as you probably gathered by now, these ocean rebates are really highly valued, especially on the high level. So this also means that denying your opponents these rebates is also really important. So how can you actually counter these master ocean rebaters? First of all, you can just cut them off from rebates. You can also steal their rebates. Also, don't place oceans that will help your opponents, and also you can just focus on your own game. So we're gonna talk about all of this, but the first thing we're gonna talk about is cut them off from rebates, because tempo players will play a bunch of greeneries next to oceans. So for example, here is your typical tempo player. If you cut him off from ocean, he will get really frustrated. And then if you keep doing this, he will get straight up mad. I'm telling you guys, cutting these tempo players off from rebates is right up there with telling them that heat production is bad. They'll get furious. So I have a few examples here. So recently I started playing ranked on Steam just to see how high I can get, and one of the few games I lost before reaching 1800 is against this guy, Inquisitor, who's a really strong player. So I started this game placing an ocean with a preload or something, and then I played restricted area next to it just to get the 3 cards. It's a pretty good play. I would do it again probably. Especially in this game, I think it was correct because my hand was terrible, so I just needed to find some better cards to play. But now we see the issue of this play, because this tile has no portal or limited access, if you will. So Inquisitor, being the good player that he is, he placed his first greenery right here. So he's kind of cutting me off from rebates, and he's cutting me off from the middle of the map like we talked about. That is the good place to be. And then later I built a city to cut him off from rebates. So this is my second portal, if you will. Now I have access to the middle of the map. And then he built Protected Valley, so now he also has a second portal. And to be honest, in this particular game, it wasn't really that big of a deal because I wasn't really playing the map that much. I didn't find any plant production except for that one plant production I have. So in this game in particular, it didn't matter that much about all the blocking off of rebates and stuff like this, but it's more like to show you how these guys are thinking about the game. Like really thinking about ocean rebates and really thinking about how to block the other guy so he doesn't have access to the good places on the map. That's something the top elo guys on Steam are really thinking a lot about when they play. And just to illustrate my point, soon after this, Inquisitor blocked me off completely once again by playing Land Claim and Industrial Center. And normally I would be sad about losing, but in this game he almost made a flower in the middle of the map, which I thought was quite beautiful. Here's another game I played recently against this guy Parker, or if you've watched Dota, you probably know him better as Gods. He's a Dota 2 commentator. But as of this game, I believe he was like the 3rd highest rated player on Steam, so he's a very strong player. But in this game, he started off playing Experimental Forest on, of course, the best tile in the game, like we talked about, and then I played Commercial District, which is a little bit questionable, but I think it was still fine in this case. But I played Commercial District over here with the other plants. And already here there was actually an opportunity to place my Commercial District next to his greenery, just to be very annoying and to cut him off from future rebates. But I didn't do that, so God, he made 2 oceans, and then he made this greenery here, and now he's really ready to start ocean walking. But then I played this land claim here, completely messing up his plan, so that's gonna be very frustrating for him. And then he got Protected Valley, which is basically his second portal, so now he can begin ocean walking to the south of the river. And then I blocked him again by playing Dome Crater, but to be honest, it's not that big of a deal because he already has access to the south of the river, so this block doesn't do that much. But then I played Ecological Zone, and then immediately I converted right next to the Ecological Zone, so this was a big hit because remember, these two tiles are the best tiles in the game. These two tiles are worth 10 mega credits per tile. So I'm getting these two tiles for myself, which is really good, but even more important, I'm actually denying Gods these two tiles because he's all in on terraforming, so these two tiles is definitely something he wanted. And also remember Anthracite's point from earlier that if you're playing a 2-player game, then these tiles are sort of kind of double in value because I'm getting these tiles, but also Gods is not getting these tiles. And to be honest, I still lost this game because Gods, he closed the game in Generation 9 and I made a few huge mistakes that I'm going to talk about in episode 6, but that being said, my tile laying was still kind of good. It's still a good thing to actually block him off from Rebates. So Gods kind of got the last laugh in this one, so he turned back into this nice little innocent happy flower here, and to be honest, this is probably a more fair representation of what Gods is actually like. He's actually a super chill dude, he's one of the nicest guys I've ever met. So just like cutting people off from Rebates is really important, you should also steal their rebates if possible. So stealing their rebates is a big swing in both mega credits and plants, and even if you give them VP for planting next to their city, it's still worth it most of the time. And like Anthracite was talking about, it's extra important to steal rebates in 2-player games. So the most extreme example I have of this is an entirely different game where I played a much lower rated opponent. So his first city was really good, it's on the good spot, and then my first conversion is next to Noctis City. So he sort of blocked me down here, I suppose, but it's really not a big deal because I wasn't planning on going this way with my greeneries. Instead I built a city up here and then also steal his first rebate. And then I placed this land claim here, which is really good because I know that later in the game this tile itself could give him 10 mega credit worth of value. So I just continued to steal his rebates, and you probably know where this is going. I actually end up stealing all of his rebates from the city. So I actually planted 5 greeneries around his city, or in other words, I almost reversed flowered him. And to be clear, reverse flowered is actually not an expression, I just made that up. So I planted 5 greeneries around his city, and you might be thinking, what, are you crazy? I just gave him 5 victory points. But the thing is, I also stole from him 1 steal, 5 plants, and 20 mega credits. So in total, what I stole from him is 32 mega credits worth of value. So is that better than 5 victory points? I would argue yes. And once again, remember this idea that these values are kind of double because we are playing a 2-player game, and to be honest, some of the greeneries I played around his city also helped my city. But even if it didn't, I think this would still be worth it. And another way to counter these master ocean rebaters is simply to not place oceans that will help your opponents. So if you do not intend to play the map, then it might actually be better to not create the best oceans in the middle of the map, because then you're just helping your opponent, right? What I mean is, if you place these 4 oceans and then you do nothing, then well, you're just setting your opponent up to place all of these juicy spots we discussed before. So if you're placing these 4 oceans, it must be because you yourself are intending to place something next to these oceans. Here's a much easier representation of how not to help your opponent. So let's say your opponent already placed this city, maybe he had research outpost or something. In that case, you should not place this water, because then you're just helping him. Because now you've just given your opponent an easy way to claim these ocean rebates next to his city, so that's not good. And finally, you could just focus on your own game. I mean, if you are a greedy player, if you just want to go for the long game, just play your game, it's fine. But actually, this is a little bit of a terrible piece of advice, because at the very least you should block him with like a land claim or a special tile or something. You should do something to interrupt his little empire of ocean walking. So technically this one should be just focus on your own game, but at the same time block him as much as possible. Finally, I want to talk about the aquifer. Is this a good standard project? Because the Meister said something very interesting. He said also something that dawned on me very late is the value of rebates. I think you don't value them as highly as you are not really on board with the SP Ocean, which is one of the most crucial SP for the early game in my opinion. I also didn't realize their value when trying to math every production out correctly. Oceans, plants and tiles have a huge amount of value if you combine them, and this actually is what makes the tempo play so strong. You get those oxygen points, but you also get a lot of cash back when you play your greens, especially on Elysium and Tharsis. So basically the Meister here is describing exactly why the tempo strategy is so strong. And I agree that the tempo strat is really good, but I still am not on board with the SP Ocean. So I replied to him that regarding Ocean Rebates, I can appreciate how 4 or 6 mega credits and 2 plants can be powerful, especially considering you can play Oceans as your first action and then greenery special tiles or something next to it. But even still, you don't always get the dream placement like this, so what is an average placement bonus of an Ocean worth? If the plants you get is exactly the plants you need in order to convert into a greenery, then it's great. Otherwise, I just can't agree that it's a crucial standard project in the early game. It's still rather expensive. We just established that a TR is worth around 8 mega credits in the early game and then declining. This means that the value of a placement bonus on the Ocean itself should be like 10 mega credits. I know that you guys love your rebates, but geez, Ocean cards I can understand, but personally I'm not that crazy about the Ocean standard project. So originally I said that a placement bonus is around 4, and that means that you're overpaying by 6. I'm willing to meet the Meister halfway and say that a placement bonus is worth around 6 and therefore you're only overpaying by 4. But why does the Meister, who is a strong player, still think that Ocean standard project is good in the early game? I think it's because, like he alluded to, there are some hidden bonuses of placing an Ocean. First of all, it's important to understand that you have 2 actions, so you can set yourself up to get a better rebate as your second action. Also, if you're placing an Ocean on plants, it may allow you to convert into a greenery immediately. And finally, and this one is just me being a little bit biased against these tempo nerds, but to be honest, this is part of it. If you are playing the tempo game, then you want to close the game, so placing this Aquafire standard project just helps you close the game. And that's pretty much all for this video, so a special thanks to all of the top Elo players on Steam. I actually do appreciate all the input they've given me, even though I've made fun of them a little bit, calling them tempo nerds and stuff like this.
If you haven't subscribed to Boneless Dota yet, or to our channel, Legendary Tactics, we certainly appreciate any support that you can offer us. Thanks for watching.